welcome. Please like and comment, ask questions, and invite your friends. We will post this class recording and slides after the class. We'll post the link in the chat. Did you all respond to the poll? If yes, thank you. If not, please do that now. One last reminder, to help improve our program, we're sending you a survey via email after this class. We appreciate you completing the survey. So it looks like about 67% are not master gardeners. 19% are master gardeners in another California county. And a few 15% in El Dorado County. So it's great that you completed the poll. Okay, so let's get going. Deborah Nichols. Deborah Nichols has been a UC Master Gardener since 2012. Deborah is our help desk coordinator and assists many of the public with their backyard landscape questions. She is also an active volunteer in our demonstration garden. Deborah, I'll turn the class over to you now.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Ruth. So I am a master gardener, and just FYI, I'm also a California naturalist, and I am a member of the California Native Plant Society because I am a native of this county and I love the environment. So why should we care about native oaks? First of all, I bet a lot of you moved up here because this area was so very beautiful. And part of that beauty are our oak trees. This would not be El Dorado County without oak trees. If you ask somebody who wasn't from California or who just recently moved here what their idea of California might be other than Disneyland or Golden Gate Bridge, they'd probably think about a grassy hillside covered with oaks. They add great natural beauty to your property, and they also add value to your property, 7 to 9% increased value to have a mature tree on your property, not just oak trees, but any tree. They provide shade. And as I mentioned, they're iconic emblems of our state. In addition, they are ideal trees in that they are tough, hardy, drought tolerant, adapted to our climate, and fairly disease resistant. As an indication, you're probably wondering why I posted this rather ugly looking affair here. This picture, this is a live oak that came down many years ago, and all that kind of carpeting looking stuff is the tree attempting to reshoot from its roots. They're hard to kill. And they are keystones of our natural environment and support a myriad of creatures, great and small. Oaks are vital to the natural environment. I'm not going to read this whole quote, but they have more biodiversity than almost any other terrestrial ecosystem in California, or they support a greater biodiversity. There's at least 300 terrestrial vertebrate species. There's 1,100 native vascular plant species, 370 fungal species, and an estimated 5,000 arthropods, which are insects and spiders and such, that are associated with California oak woodlands. Now, about oaks, they are members of the beech family, and there are 300 to 500 species worldwide, including in the tropics and in the temperate zone. So that makes them one of the most common species of flowering plants. In this state, there are at least 18 to 22 species in the state, with many additional subspecies and named hybrids. Just a minute here. And I say 18 to 22 because it depends on your resources. There's always discussion among botanists about what is and isn't a species or a subspecies. Plus, if you're aware of what's been going on in botany in the last 10 to 15 years, things are changing constantly within all of this. In El Dorado County, and there are known seven tree species, 3 shrub species, and a variety of subspecies, with Amador County having a few less, mainly because of elevational issues. So the characteristics of all oaks: they always have dangling male catkins that release pollen in the wind. So they are wind pollinated, which is why some of us are allergic to them. They always have a tiny female flower that has 3 stigma, and the flower is so tiny that it's very hard to take a good picture of them. All oaks have an acorn in a scale-covered cup. So I've got 3 local oaks here: the interior live oak acorn, which is narrow, and the black oak, which has sort of a shaggy cup on top of it, and then the canyon oak, which has a gold cup on top of it. And acorns are tempting packages of carbs. They're 20 to 30% fat and 6 to 8% protein. They were a favored food of Native Americans, and they are eagerly feasted upon by all animals, ranging from deer to wood rats to wild turkeys and a myriad of insects. And just a warning, don't go out and try to eat acorn because they're filled with tannins and they have to be prepared properly or they will make you sick. Some of the creatures that feed upon acorns are vital in helping distribute the nuts and planting them. Acorn scrub jays are a keystone species in oak woodlands, in that they plant acorns for their own use in the future, but they frequently forget where they are, and so a tree will grow from what the scrub jay has planted. Most other animals just eat the acorn as they lay, except for acorn woodpeckers, and they are noted for digging holes in trees or fence posts, or sometimes people's houses, and inserting an acorn for future consumption. And acorn woodpeckers exist in colonies. They live in large family groups, so they all share in the acorns once they've been put into the fence post or whatever. And the top right picture, that was, I had a gray pine that fell down, and it was fairly rotted, and the bark fell off of it when it fell down. And this cache of acorns was in the bark. You can see the holes at the top left of the picture where the woodpeckers had been industriously banging in the acorns, but the wood was so rotten that it just kind of flopped down into the bark. I don't know how the woodpeckers would ever have gotten to those acorns. So this is a subject that comes up a lot when you're talking to people about oak trees in the fall, especially. They talk about a mast year with acorns. Mast is an old English word for meat. It refers to a tree's crop. And oak trees, an individual oak tree can produce up to 10,000 acorns. But they are alternate year producers, which fruit trees do the same thing. One year they have a heavy crop and the next year they have a light crop. And some acorns take 2 years to mature, and you'll actually see, for instance, on, I think it's black oaks, where you'll have acorns that are going to fall this year and other acorns that are still maturing, which accounts, sometimes you'll see several different sizes on a tree. They also, different oaks pollinate at different times, and they can be adversely affected by climatic conditions, or conversely, they can be beneficially affected by climatic conditions, especially in microclimates. So one particular tree or a group of trees, particular species of tree in an area, might have a productive or mast year, but not all acorns in all places will drop at one time. So let's talk a little more. I'm going to talk about oak identification, so you know what you have on your property or what you see when you're walking. And I'm hoping I'm not going to confuse anybody with this, but oaks in everywhere fall into evolutionary lineages or subgenuses. So the oaks in California are divided into white oaks, and that's just a generic kind of a term. It refers to valley, blue, Oregon, scrub, and leather oaks. And another group, subgenus, is the red-black oaks, and that includes the black oak and the interior live oak. Then an intermediate subgenus is the canyon oak and the huckleberry oak. And this matters because oaks hybridize, but they only hybridize within subgenus. And you'll notice, probably all of you have noticed at one time, what are called oak apples. Those are a round gall, and they come in a huge variety of colors and shapes and sizes, but they are unique to the species of oak or to a subgenus. And it affects the acorns in white oak subgenus ripen in 1 year, acorns in red, black, and intermediate subgenus, got a spelling error there, ripen in 2 years. So diseases may also affect one subgenus more than others, particular diseases. So I'm going to go through the identification of oaks for primarily El Dorado County, though Amador County is also included in this mostly. There's a big, what I call the big five for the county, the most common, but I'm also going to throw in a few extra just to confuse you a little bit. So the big five is the valley oak, the black oak, interior live oak, blue oak, and canyon oak. Those are the most common oaks that you will see, and I know places where you can go and see all five of them in one place. The majority of oaks you will see are, like I said, the five above. There are other possible species, and there's also hybrids, and there are subspecies. So probably what I would call the iconic oak of California is the valley oak. These are the big, huge, giant ones. They have massive horizontal limbs and spreading crowns. They prefer moist bottomlands or riparian habitat, so you're not as apt to see them on north slopes or rocky areas or the higher areas. They will grow up to 6,500 foot elevation, but it's got to be good soil. The leaves of the valley oak are 2 to 4 inches long. They have deep, blunt lobes, and I will be showing a picture further on. They're matte green above, pale green below, with felt-like hair. And the acorns are conical shaped, sort of like little bullets, really, in warty caps. The bark is very thick and grooved and nearly corky looking, and it's pewter in color. And they are deciduous oaks. They lose all their leaves. They're members of the white oak subgenus. Another member of the white oak subgenus is the Quercus douglasii, which is the blue oak. They are a moderate sized tree. They do not grow as big as the valley oak. They have a spreading crown, or they can be more upright depending on the growing conditions. They are a deciduous tree, but they can also go dormant during the summer, especially during drought years. So this year I've noticed that some of the blue oaks was pretty dry for prolonged periods last winter, and some of the blue oaks, and it's been dry this summer. So some of the blue oaks are starting to lose their leaves or have gone dormant. They grow up to 3,500 foot elevation in shallow soils. So in less wonderful soils, in other words. The leaves are 1 to 3 inches long, and they're wavy or shallowly lobed. Now, they are most blue in the early fall, but they do have a distinct blue tinge almost always. The underside is pale green. The acorns are tapered and shallow, warty caps. The bark is light gray or whitish in narrow, shallow strips, and they are a member of the white oak subgenus. Now this oak, I was surprised to find that we have Oregon oak, which is Quercus garryana, in this part of California. They do, of course, thrive in Oregon, and they are very large trees on the coast. But we do have them here. They are a moderate-sized tree in this area with upright limbs and spreading crowns. They're not super common, but they could throw you for a bit of a loop when you see them. One thing that, let's see, and they grow from 1,000 to 4,000 feet in rocky, gravelly, or heavy clay. So they like bad soil too, sort of like the blue oak does. So what I wanted to say right here about elevations on oak trees, it just can vary a lot with the conditions and with the soil and with the slope. In other words, does the slope of the, if it's on a slope, does it face north or south? It can make a huge difference as to what conditions the oak will tolerate. So you can see the acorn on this oak is very chubby, I guess, or rotund, you might say. So this is fairly distinctive. There's not a lot of other oaks, especially in this area, that have acorns like that. They, and the cups are small, so it's kind of like a little hat on top of this chubby acorn. The leaves are big, they're 4 to 6 inches. They're broad, they're lobed, though not as deeply lobed as a valley oak. They're smooth and they're spineless, which means they don't have pointy edges. They're shiny, dark green on top, lighter underneath, and sort of hairy. The bark is white to grayish, finely fissured, and they are also members of the white oak subgenus. And then there's also shrubs. A lot of people talk about scrub oak, and there is several species that are scrub oaks. But in the white oak subgenus, an interesting shrub is the leather oak, which is Quercus dorado. It grows below 6,000 feet in only serpentine soil. The most common place you might see them up by Georgetown, there's a preserve called Traverse Creek, and you can go up there and see them. Their leaves are only about 1 inch. They're convex, which means that they cup. And they're oval, as you can see, dull green with pale green underside. And then the inland scrub oak, and I'm not going to even attempt, it's Quercus berberidifolia, grow below 5,000 foot in foothills and upland slopes. Leaves are also small, they're only 1 inch or less, with variable shapes and margins, so it can be frustrating trying to identify them, but they do have rounded tips, whereas a young live oak, which is what it most would look like, has a pointed tip. So they're shiny green above and dull grayish below. So in the black-red subgenus is the Quercus kellogii. They are tall trees with ascending limbs and open rounding crowns. And they tend to grow sometimes in groves or clusters. They grow from 2,000 to 6,000 foot in elevation, and they are deciduous. And here's one, I think this must be from last fall, that's beginning to turn color. The acorns are oblong in a deep shaggy cup, sort of like a shingled roof. The leaves are 2 to 6 inches. They can be very large with deep angular lobes, so kind of just pointy looking, as it were, with a bristle at the tip of each lobe. So that's distinctive, the bristle is. And they are shiny green. The bark is smooth and gray in youth, and it becomes blackish and deeply fissured as it ages. So trying to identify any oak tree from the bark can be kind of tricky because the bark always changes. It starts out being fairly smooth on most trees and then gets its character as it gets to be a much older tree. But here's a black oak leaf on the left and a valley oak leaf on the right. And you can just see that the black oak leaf just looks more angular, and hopefully you can see the little bristles at the tip of each point. So in this area, the only other tree that might have these bristles is a hybrid. It is not one of the main species. So one oak that people tend to not like very much for some reason is the interior live oak, and that is the Quercus wislezenii. It is typically broader than it is tall, and it can have multiple trunks. Now the multiple trunks, they also can grow with a single trunk. The multiple trunks are usually a result of them being predated by deer or by people like me mowing over them when they're mowing down their pasture. And they just grow right back, but then they start growing extra limbs to increase their chance of survival. So that's why you've got them with the multiple trunks. They grow below 5,000 feet from the floodplains to the slopes. So they're not very picky about where they grow. The leaves are thick and leathery, deep green above, yellowish green below, and they can be smooth-toothed or spiny. But when I say spiny, I don't mean the bristles, just little sharp edges on them. The acorn is narrow and it sits deep in a cup. So the cup is almost half the length of the acorn sometimes. Bark is smooth and gray when it's young and ages to a dark and fissured look. And it is an evergreen member, so it does not, healthy one should not lose its leaves, except the old leaves will fall off, but on the whole, it shouldn't be losing all of its leaves. So I mentioned hybrids, and that is a common one in this area is called the oracle oak, Quercus exmorhus. It's a hybrid of the black and interior live oaks, which are in the black-red subgenus. So that's why those two oaks can cross-pollinate, and because they tend to grow in the same areas. So if you're walking along and you see a tree with odd-shaped leaves and you're trying to figure, well, it could be a black oak, but kind of looks like a live oak, but what is it? So pick a couple leaves, and if the leaves aren't deeply lobed and angular, but more shallowly lobed and angular, but still has those bristles, it might be the oracle oak. And they can be evergreen, they can be deciduous. Sometimes they just turn color, but don't drop their leaves. But there are actually a surprising number of them around. And my favorite oak is Quercus chrysolpus, which is the canyon oak. It is a medium-sized tree found in all soils, in variable habitat and variable form. And it does not just grow in canyons, which I thought for many years it can also grow on ridges or just anywhere. What's distinctive about this tree, and it grows up to 9,000 foot elevation, so it has quite a tolerance for cold and snow. It grows up to 9,000 foot elevation. It has, if you can see here, gold cups. Its nickname is gold cup oak. And that's because in the fall, like right now, if you go out and you find one, it will have these fuzzy little, that's fuzz on the acorn cup. And then the acorn itself is sort of chubby. And then the underside of the leaf on the canyon oak is this gold color. So they're quite distinctive. But you have to get up close really to see them. You're driving down the road, you might not notice them. So the acorns are up to 2 inches long. They can be very large. And the saucer-shaped cup has those fine golden hairs on it. The leaves are 1 to 2.5 inches. And from above, you might think it's a live oak, though live oaks tend to be a little duller in color. They're shiny dark green above. Underside is gray with gold hairs. The bark is gray or whitish, and it's in smooth, shallow strips. And they are the member of the intermediate subgenus. And then one oak in this county, which you will not see in Amador County, is the huckleberry oak, Quercus vacciniifolia. It's a member of the intermediate subgenus. It's a densely leafed spreading shrub up to 4 foot tall. So if you spend much time, it grows up to 10,000 feet and is rarely found below 5,000 feet. And if you've spent any time in the Sierra Nevadas hiking, you've probably seen rocky slopes and hillsides covered with these small oak shrubs. So I know I kind of whizzed through this because this really is an oak ID class. I just wanted you to think about how you might identify the oaks on your property or in your neighborhood. I'm going to show you some websites at the end of all of this for helping to identify oaks. So there's also several good books. The Oaks of California is a little more scholarly and in-depth and talks about things like oak environments, the disappearance of oaks, what urbanization in California is doing to oaks. But it has a nice write-up on each oak, and it's got a very useful key for IDing oaks. Plus it has pictures of the various leaves and acorns. But the handiest one is the Laws Field Guide to the Sierra Nevada by John Muir Laws. And this is a book, if you're interested in nature of Sierra Nevada, you should have this book. That's my plug for the day, I guess. It's filled with everything from spiders to mushrooms to trees to flowers to rats. I mean, it's everything that's native to the Sierra Nevada. So a question that we frequently get in some of the classes we teach is, I've got a big oak tree on my property. Can I cut it down? Or my neighbor is cutting down his oak trees. Is he allowed to do that? So I'm going to address that issue briefly here. There was an ordinance adopted in 2017 as part of the general plan that had the intention of preserving our native oak trees. It is more stringent than California state law in that you must pay to mitigate if you're removing oaks from your property unless they are hazard trees. And it's not, as master gardeners, we don't interpret law. I'm going to share a website with you, and go to our website after all of this if you want to know about all the different resources I've talked about, and there'll be links to or names for them so you can find them. The best practice is to contact the county before removal unless you're convinced that that tree is a hazard to you. And in that case, I'd take some pictures. So whizzing through oak identification, now we're going to talk about problems with oaks, and this is not going to be in-depth because oaks, I say they're disease resistant, but they still get disease and they get damaged by insects because after all, they're part of the natural environment and all the native insects have evolved with oaks. And even though oaks are packed with tannins, it seems like a large number of the insects and invertebrates like deer and turkeys and even wild boar, which aren't native to California, they've all overcome the problem with the tannin in oaks. So there's two agents of damage to any plant. One is biotic, and that's damage caused by pathogens, pests, animals, parasites, and any other living thing. So that could be fungus, for instance. Excuse me. And the other is abiotic, which is damage caused by adverse environmental conditions or poor cultural practices. And humans are the main ones that make changes to the environment that can cause abiotic damage to oaks, unless there's something like an avalanche or a flood, which also, of course, would damage oaks abiotically. So the problems with oaks is us. We have met the enemy and he is us. That's a quote from Walt Kelly from way back in the 70s. 30% of the native oaks in this state have been eliminated mainly through development and agriculture. And we're all aware of all the development that's going on in this county. And even though theoretically having to mitigate removal of a tree does not mean that the tree is not going to be removed. It just means that the developers are going to pay for the privilege. First, I'm going to discuss some of the biotic problems that you might encounter with oaks. So a very common one that we got a lot of phone calls about after the drought broke a few years ago is powdery mildew. This is generally caused by too much rain late in the spring. It's most obvious on blue oaks. It turns them a pale blue or almost white. And if you're familiar with powdery mildew on your roses or dahlias or something like that, you know what I'm talking about. It's the same thing. Nothing really needs to be done. And the trees may lose, especially if they're blue oaks, they may lose most of their leaves even in the spring, but they will most likely grow them back by the following spring. Here's something people have seen is, mushrooms growing out of oak trees. That's really never a good thing. This is a sample of Armillaria root rot or oak root fungus. It is favored by warm, wet soils, and which is caused, for instance, if you've got a tree in a lawn and you're watering the lawn a lot, your tree could develop this oak root fungus. So you may actually see the mushrooms. You don't always see them, but and the mushrooms themselves, they're only the fruit. The mycelia is the long strands, which is the body of a fungus. It grows, and those are growing all through the tree. There's really no reasonable treatment. And this tree could live another 20, 50, 100 years with this oak root fungus. So it may or may not kill the tree. If the tree's near your house, you're definitely going to want to take a look at it. Just pay attention. And if it starts to look shaky, you may need to remove it. Other fungal diseases are Phytophthora root and crown rot. This also is promoted by excess soil moisture and poor drainage. The leaves become discolored, they stunt, they wilt, or they drop prematurely. The roots, if you were to dig down, would be dark and decayed. And the trees may die from this. Draining the standing water may help. So if you've got an oak tree and somehow ended up in a hollow spot, as it were, or a hollow in your yard, you might want to figure out a way to drain the water away from it. Another fungus is anthracnose. It can cause severe defoliation of new growth during wet spring weather, but the tree should recover most likely. Then there's sudden oak death. And everybody gets very concerned about that, but so far, sudden oak death, it only occurs on the coast live oak, I believe, but it is only 50 miles from the coast. It has not come any closer to us, in other words. So it's highly unlikely that if your oak is sick, that it has sudden oak death. And if it does, we want to know about it. So fungal diseases, so some of a few of these I think were bacteria, but also some were fungal diseases. So the visible sign is a mushroom, and that could mean that the wood is filled with mycelium. The fungus itself does not really kill the tree, but the damage is done to the wood itself. It causes structural failure eventually. That's why sometimes you'll see what looks like a perfectly healthy oak tree fall down in a storm or something, and it'll be hollow inside. And it could be that a fungus did that to the tree. And there's little that can be done for a tree that is displaying fungus, but like I said, it may take decades for the tree to give up its battle. So if you love the tree and it's not a danger to you or anybody else, I would leave it. So other diseases that are not necessarily caused by fungus is one of them is foamy canker, also known as alcoholic flux. And this is when white frothy material oozes from wounds in the tree. And it does smell like alcohol. No real treatment is not necessarily necessary to treat the tree. The wounds are things like caused by string trimmers, or if you're just careless with whatever you're doing around the tree. Or deer maybe could damage a tree and allow the bacteria to get into it. Something that's more hazardous to a tree is foamy bark canker. And yes, I know they sound very similar. This is a fungal disease spread by western oak bark beetles, and they're native beetles. Sometimes there's just too many of them. This disease is new in this area on interior live oaks. And a sign is a pink to, and note the pink, to white frothy foam that oozes from the bark. And there's not really any wound there. There might be a little tiny hole from the insect, but it could be high up on the tree. It's not caused by something like a string trimmer. It may also show a reddish sap that oozes from the insect holes. This is likely going to be fatal to the tree, and it can be contagious. So at this point is when you probably want to call in an arborist and discuss what to do with your tree. Another common problem with oak trees that some of you probably experience is something called variously limb drop, summer branch drop, or sudden limb failure. This is all the same problem. It's a summer phenomenon that often occurs on hot, calm days, which is sort of counterintuitive. You'd think it would be on a windy day. The branches that break off are frequently those that are horizontal, and 3 to 12 foot from a trunk. And the limbs themselves may be sound when they come off. The mechanism that causes this is not really fully understood. There is some thought that drought stress could induce this, but not always. So just, if, like I have said earlier about hazard trees or limbs, if they're over a driveway, a sidewalk, or your roof, it might not be a bad idea to have your tree pruned so that you don't have to experience this, because I have, and it's sort of a shock. So one way to help avoid it is to avoid improperly pruning a tree that could create an overgrowth of new wood and leaves on a limb, because that's any tree's response to being pruned, is try to push out more wood and more leaves, and that makes the limb heavier. And large horizontal limbs, as I said, should be removed if they're in a dangerous location, such as over a house, a walkway, or a driveway. Another common problem with oak trees is mistletoe. Mistletoe is a native plant that is spread by birds. It shouldn't kill a healthy tree, but it can be pruned out, but it usually regrows. So if you call an arborist in to take care of it, really the places where the mistletoe is removed should be treated, or maybe the branch cut back, because it will regrow, because it's, the roots get down into the wood. So as I say, there are sprays. Instead of cutting, you could just spray, but they have to be repeated. And obviously on a big tree, this could get kind of expensive, and it's not environmentally sound. The mistletoe does provide habitat and food for a variety of animals and insects. Even deer will eat mistletoe itself if it falls to the ground. Brief discussion of insects, and I know I only have about 20 minutes to go here. There are a variety of borers, beetles, caterpillars, worms, mites, aphids, scale, and leafhoppers that can infest oak leaves, twigs, bark, woods, and acorns. They will generally not kill a healthy tree, and treatment is usually not warranted considering the expense and risk associated with large-scale spraying. So mainly you have to learn to live with it, even though sometimes it can be a bit unsightly. Common caterpillar in oak trees, the fruit tree leaf roller. It rolls up young leaves and ties them in silk, causing leaf distortion. And then the caterpillar larvae hang down on silken threads, and probably some of us have, I know I have, walked into larvae hanging down on their silken threads. They can completely defoliate a tree, which is a problem if the tree is otherwise stressed. In other words, during a drought year, or because the roots, you built your house over half the tree's roots or something like that. Tent caterpillars are also common, and this year they seem to be fairly widespread. There's several species that could affect a variety of trees, actually. They may make silken tents or mats that they rest in when they're molting. It is unsightly and it's messy, but it will generally not kill a tree. And when I say that, it's once again, if it's a healthy tree, it's probably going to be fine. There's also a California oakworm or oak moth, and it can defoliate a tree, but will generally not kill it. And a lot of these evolved, they're native insects that evolved with trees. There's no benefit to them to kill their host. So generally, like I said, they will not kill a tree. Another phenomenon, insect that you might notice, only you don't actually see the insect, are the galls that can grow on oak trees. And like I mentioned earlier, the apple, it's called some people call them apple galls. They start out green and then they turn brown. They're quite common on valley oaks and blue oaks. They are an overgrowth of plant tissue that is produced in response to chemicals that are secreted by a gall wasp laying its egg and then the larvae hatching. And the gall wasp is from the cynipid family generally. The wasp cells and the larvae are very tiny. If you saw one of the wasps flying around, you wouldn't see it. It's so small. It's like the size of a fruit fly. So each wasp lays its eggs on only one species of tree or on only trees in one subgenus. So those so-called oak apples are only going to be in members of the white oak subgenus. You won't see them, for instance, on black oak. Now you might see something similar that's caused by a different wasp. So here's some oak apples. They come in a variety of shapes, sizes, and colors, and each is unique to each wasp species. And each gall may contain several insects, actually. It's a whole little universe that includes the gall wasp larvae, the larvae's parasites, and others who are feeding on the gall itself or just looking for a safe place to hang out. And here's an example of a gall on a blue oak. It looks like little Mexican hats, and it's very tiny. Some of these are very small, but they're fun to discover. Here is what I think is an urchin gall on a blue oak. So about insects, in conclusion, remember that all insects are potential food for hungry wildlife. Each insect is part of the web of life, each native insect. They usually are balanced by the non-beneficial insects, such as the oakworms and things, are usually balanced by beneficial insects that feed on them, or once again, birds. Birds, I don't have all the data in my head, but a bird that is raising young usually feeds some caterpillars, and they could feed upward of like 1,000 caterpillars to each baby a year for just one set of nestlings. So they eat a lot of caterpillars. And pesticides, if you were to use pesticides, they can also harm the beneficial insects and any creature who might eat the insects. So this will be posted with the PowerPoint on our website. Pests of Landscape Trees and Shrubs is a book that is very useful. In the back of the book, it's divided by the tree species, so you can go and look through your symptoms and maybe identify the pest. Something that's available on the web is a USDA field guide to insects and diseases of California oaks. So human-caused damage. As I've said, we're the biggest threat to oak trees. The building of homes, driveways, sidewalks, and roads result in compaction of soil, which physically damages the roots and starves them of water and nutrients. And also, I probably should have mentioned oxygen, which they need. Lawns around oak trees can lead to diseases caused by too much water impacting the trunk or the shallow roots. Planting in the root zone of an oak can cause mechanical damage to the roots And watering new plants where you've planted them under the oaks can lead to these fungal diseases I mentioned. If you must plant, select small. In other words, don't buy the biggest 10-gallon plant out there, plant small ones. The drought tolerant natives preferably, and plant far away from the trunk. Overspray from herbicides, even if you're not using it on the oak, can damage the oak trees. And raking all the fallen oak leaves, which I know we all want to do because of fire danger, but the tree actually gets a lot of nutrients from those leaves as they slowly decay. So I think I'm getting close to the conclusion here. Don't panic, oaks are tough. And once again, I have another picture of an oak that is sad and pathetic looking. That thing was just a stump when I bought my home. And at this point, it's developing a whole new top. You can actually see through it. Don't know what happened to it. It's pretty blasted. It looks like lightning hit it, which actually I don't think happened. But there are not many conditions that will kill them outright. It is best to take a wait and see attitude with most problems, unless they have been diagnosed with a deadly contagious disease. So here's a collection of mostly of do's and don'ts, mostly do nots. Don't water them. Now, sometimes you'll see websites will say you can water them during extended drought, but you have to do that in the winter, because if you do it in the summer, then you're risking fungal disease. So my thought is that oaks evolved with the droughts in California, and many of those oaks are several hundred years old, the bigger ones, and they've been through a lot of droughts. So unless you've done something to the tree, it probably does not need to be watered during a drought. Don't plant within the drip line if at all possible. Try not to rake up their leaves because they are mulch for the oak tree. Don't cover the crown by backfilling soil up to a trunk. And keep mulch away from trunks and buttress roots. So it's okay to mulch around the tree with something other than the leaves. Just pull it back about maybe even 6 feet away from the trunk. Do not pile rocks on the roots or around trunks, which I've seen plenty of. Avoid damage from string trimmers because pathogens do enter the wounds. And don't, if you can help it, don't dig into their roots and don't cover them with cement or stones, which is sort of, this is repetitive, but the idea is try to leave the tree alone. Don't fertilize around them. The tree does not need the fertilizer. And if you're planting native plants, they most likely don't need fertilizer either, because it can cause an overgrowth. And once again, you might have disease because of the overgrowth of new leaves will attract insects and disease. Do not use herbicides around the oak trees because they are susceptible to it. And if you're going to prune, you should prune deciduous oaks in the winter. So something like a valley oak or a blue oak or a black oak, you would prune in the winter. And evergreen oaks in the summer. So a live oak you would prune in the summer when it is actually fairly dormant. Prune properly and avoid creating wounds or places where water can gather. And you can go to websites to learn how to prune. Whoops, sorry, I jumped ahead here. So as I said, I was going to talk about the resources. So now I'm going to try to do a share here of some of my websites. Don't tell me it's not going to work. There we go. Okay, so I talked about the oak ordinance. You can go and, like I said, the links will be in the back of my slideshow, but www.edcgov.us, and just start poking around for oak conservation ordinance. And this is a Q&A that is several pages long. And it may help you with the information that you're looking for. So let's do. Okay, now this is one of my favorite websites. This is CalFlora. You don't have to be a member to use it. If you go in here, the first thing that comes up is the search page. And if I was to type Quercus, or in this case, just use it, and then select El Dorado County. And then I'll do the search. You'll get a list of every oak species and subspecies and hybrid in the county. So you can do this for any county. And it'll have pictures that'll help you identify the oak. Like if you thought you had an inland scrub oak on your property, and that first one was, you can see how the leaves, I described them as not being pointed, they're blunt on the edge. So that makes them quite a bit different from a lot of oak trees. Plus they're pretty small. Another nice website is CalFlora. So that's CalScape rather, calscape.org. So it brings up, this is the webpage you see when you log on to it. If you were to click on trees and search, say you want to know what kind of, just all kinds of things about, you have a valley oak and you want to know things about it. So you type in here, Quercus lobata, and you get a screen that shows, and I'm having trouble, hold on. It'll tell you a lot, and it'll tell you what kind of care it needs, and if you're actually planning on planting one, even nurseries where you can get it. It also will tell you what kinds of butterflies and moths, and these are natives, are hosted by this tree. And there's 17 confirmed and 151 likely. There's a lot of attention now being paid to native habitats in the backyard, of maintaining either the trees and shrubs and plants that are already there, or planting more to encourage native insects and such, so that we have a healthier environment. This will also show the distribution in case you're just curious about that. And then there's nice pictures. There's a bunch of photos that will help you identify the plant. And then I'm looking for the Berkeley. This is UC Oaks, which is University of California. It's a website that's dedicated to oak trees. And you can, like, here's for oak ID, what kind of oak is this? And it will show pictures. You can do it by leaves or the acorns. And then it will have little panels below that tell you about the various trees, about a description of them and their nicknames. So that can be handy. And then last but not least, this is the UCANR pest notes, which we use a lot as master gardeners, that if you call and you say you have a problem with aphids, we're probably going to go here and get the information you need about them. But on the left, you can use this if you've been told that your tree has a particular disease or something and you want to have further information on this. And you would go to like home and landscape pests. And down here we have trees and shrubs. And then you can look by the name. I think they do common name here, so that makes it really easy. So you can click on oak. And there you go. It has a picture, and then it discusses the various things that it might be prone to, diseases and insects and stuff. So I think I'm done. So Ruth, if you want to take over, thank you everybody for joining. I hope I haven't stupefied you or anything. And Ruth, if you want to take over and handle the question and answer section.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. There was only one question.
Okay.
The question was from Karen. Are the leather oak and island scrub oak evergreen or deciduous?
They are evergreen. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So they are evergreen. So in the winter, they have all their leaves on them. Yes. That's it.
Yes, that is
Okay.
it.
Well, either I answered everybody's questions, or they're going to go to the slideshow. Like I said, it will be just search Google El Dorado, Master Gardeners of El Dorado County, and you'll see I think it's classes, and it's a drop down with handouts and presentations, and the Zoom will be there, which probably Ruth was going to tell you, and the slideshow will be there. So thank you, everybody.
Here's another one. Are there considerations for planting oaks with other trees? I want to build a permaculture food forest that incorporates oaks but doesn't harm them.
I love the idea of a food forest. Oaks are not friendly to other plants, so you can plant in the vicinity of oaks, but if you actually want to plant something that's going to produce crops other than, now huckleberry is something that actually will grow on, and huckleberries produce huckleberries, berries, and you can, you know, can those and stuff, make jellies out of them. So you could maybe plant a native like huckleberries, but there's really not a lot else. If you've got a big massive oak, you might just think it is a place where you sit and relax after you've done all your work in your garden.
We've had one more question. What's the best way to treat poison oak under oak trees?
Well, poison oak is actually very beneficial in the environment, but of course I know some people are highly allergic to it, and if you have dogs or children, you don't want it around. So your best way, I would cut it back all the way in the winter before it has leaves on it, but it's still going to be contagious, so obviously, and I'm not expert on this, but that's what I would do. And you need to dispose of it. You can't burn poison oak, because if it gets in your lungs, you're really going to have problems. But so I think you're probably asking because you're wondering about applications of some kind of herbicide. I would cut it first to the ground. You might have to cut it several times. That might eventually discourage it. If not, you might try to paint an herbicide, and I'm not going to recommend any brands, right on the stub itself, and that should get down into the roots. But what we've discovered is that roots touch one another underground and stuff, and so you just have to be careful. I mean, obviously just one plant is probably not going to hurt anything, but if you have a huge collection of poison oak, it could be problematic. So I would work on the cutting it back part. Just make sure you're thoroughly covered from head to toe, that you don't expose any skin to it, and that you don't burn it.
Okay, we have another question. What is the best way to grow oaks from acorns?
I knew someone would ask me that. I didn't cover it. I think, you know, rather than spitballing here, because I've read a lot about it, you want to make sure, first of all, that you have a healthy acorn, which you figure out by dropping them in buckets. And I think it's if they sink, then that means they have insect infestation, because they have little holes in them which take water in. But that could be the opposite. See, so already I'm confusing you. But the main thing is that when you plant them, like I said, they're choice food packets for most animals. So you plant them, I think, about a foot down, and then you want a little tube made out of something like chicken wire or something to plant it, and so that it won't get eaten by gophers. But really, that's something if you're really curious about that, call the Master Gardeners, go to our Ask a Master Gardener website and submit the question, and we'll research it and get you back a really complete answer.
Deborah,
Here's another question that popped up. What are the best acorns for culinary harvest?
Black oaks are considered to be the best. That's what the Native Americans, especially in this area, liked. But like I said, if you're going to do something like that, just make sure that you treat it properly. And once again, that's not something I could really tell you. You need to research that. You have to leach all the tannins out, or you're going to get a heck of a stomach ache at the very least.
And here's another question that popped up. do acorns handle, or I'm not sure if it's acorns or oak tree or oaks, do they handle transplanting very well?
If they're really small, you can do that.
I think it's trees. Yeah, small oak trees. Do they handle transplanting?
Well, just consider the oak tree's roots, you know, and I didn't discuss a lot of that kind of stuff. You know, you see a mature oak tree and we talk about the drip line and everybody think that means the roots go to where the water, you know, the limbs and leaves end. But oak roots actually can extend at least like another 50% beyond. So if you've got a fairly decent sized tree, I'm not sure it's gonna do real well in transplantation process. That's just my opinion. I mean, you could try it. If you're gonna kill it or cut it down because it's in the right place, then try moving it.
Okay, that's all I have from the chat room for questions.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Well, thank you. Go ahead.
I'd like to thank everyone for attending this class today. And you can find the different websites in the chat room and where you can find the recording. See, is there another one? No, yeah, there's a lot of thank yous. And they thought it was a great class. And that was, wait, there's one more question. Is there, is there a trick other than watching the foraging fauna to ID the sweet trees?
No, like I said, it's usually species, and the black oak is supposed to be the sweetest, but sweet's a relative term, so.
Yeah.
You wouldn't
Okay,
think it was
thanks
sweet.
again. Yeah. Thanks again, everyone, for attending our class. Next Wednesday on the 21st, we have Ask a Master Gardener. If you'd like to register for that class, go to our website, our public website, you know, Google what Deborah said, you know, El Dorado County Master Gardeners, and it's at 9 a.m. next Wednesday. If you have any questions for a Master Gardener. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Deborah. What a great class. I'm going to go ahead and push end class. And Deborah and Ruth, if you want to just stay on.
Okay.
Okay.